Hallo liebe UX-Community, wie ihr schon an der Geräuschkulisse merkt, ist das keine normale UX in diesem Monat-Folge. Und zwar stehe ich nämlich hier mitten in Berlin vor einem Konferenzhotel und ich werde gleich für euch auf die UX360-Konferenz gehen. Der Fokus dieser Konferenz liegt auf UX-Research, also von strategischer Wirkung über KI-Tools bis hin zu kulturell sensibler Forschung. Also schauen wir mal, wen ich hier gleich vors Mikrofon bekomme. Euch erwarten auf jeden Fall ein paar aufschlussreiche Interviews und Insights. Also steigen wir direkt mit den Interviews ein. So, hier muss der Studio Matthias mal ganz kurz reingrätschen. Wir sind hier gerade beim Schnitt des Podcasts und wollten eigentlich die folgenden englischsprachigen Interviews automatisch ins Deutsche übersetzen lassen. Aber dabei geht wirklich so viel Charakter verloren und es hört sich einfach nur komisch an. Deswegen haben wir uns jetzt dafür entschieden, diese doch im Original Englischen zu lassen. Es gibt übrigens ein deutsches Interview und meine deutsche Zusammenfassung. Also wenn ihr direkt dahin springen wollt, dann findet ihr die Sprungmarken in den Shownotes. Aber generell, lasst uns doch mal in den Kommentaren wissen, wie wir das zukünftig handhaben sollen. Also sollen die Interviews im Originalton im Englischen bleiben oder sollen wir sie lieber irgendwie komisch automatisch ins Deutsche übersetzen lassen? Also wir sind da super gespannt auf euren Input. Aber jetzt erstmal wieder zurück zum ersten englischsprachigen Interview. I'm sitting here with Barbara Koop, Head of Usability at Philips, and she gave a talk today about designing out risk with deeply people-centric approach. Barbara, can you tell us a little bit more about this topic?
Yes, what I talked about today is the specific challenges that we have in designing for healthcare, because on one hand, healthcare is of course unpredictable because you never know exactly what situation you will end up in, and you're dealing with people that might be under pressure or that might be emotional, for instance, or stressed or physically in a really tight environment. And they have to take a decision in a split second with the device that you design for them that impacts, somebody getting treated or diagnosed or getting hurt for that matter. And what I talked about is how we anchor that in our design processes by really deeply understanding the people that we design for and the context that they are in, and to make that part of our design process in doing risk assessments early on, trying out things early on, so that we can actually design for the situations that people are actually under, instead of just testing something in a clean environment and then something still going wrong in a chaotic atmosphere. And I touch a little bit upon how AI can help there and what it can do for us.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. So Philips obviously is a big company and probably you work a lot with AI right now in research. So what main trends do you see there?
Well, AI and of course generative AI is all over the place and is really booming. And of course, in safety-critical environments like healthcare, you have to be really careful. I mean, your threshold for your AI has to be really high because there is risks at stake, right? So you cannot trust an AI that's right 80%, maybe not even 90% of the time. And you always have to take the judgment yourself. But at the same time, if you do a lot of research and if you go to hospitals and if you get feedback or survey feedback back from the field, AI can really help to find patterns in there, to draw insights from there, or to generate the first draft of your documentation from there, and really relieve a lot of the designer stress, but also in our solutions for our end users to really help, to start generating ideas that can help the healthcare professional to take a decision.
So it sounds a little bit that we have even another stakeholder, AI, now at the table. So we have people-centric, this is basically what you talked about. Then we have the patients, then we have the medical staff. So bridging them all together in basically to have a good outcome, a good product at the end. What are your strategies at Philips there?
Yeah, what is our strategy? Of course, in the end, everything is about the patient. They have to be treated in the right way. They have to be comforted in the right way. And we design solutions that are perfectly fit to help the healthcare professional to do that, to do their job for that patient in the end. So we have to deal with healthcare professionals that are under pressure by making solutions that are efficient, for instance, that exactly fit their workflow, the speed of decision making, so that in the end the patients can get the best possible treatment. So that's in the end the people that is all about, is the patients that are on that table that do not directly interact or can influence the devices that we make.
As a follow-up, if we have the same conference in 5 or 10 years, what do you think, basically, how has the field changed because of all the things you just mentioned, especially in the medical area?
You know, I think that there's, of course, several routes you can take there. You can think about doom scenarios where AI will take over our work. I don't believe in that. I think that if we use AI wisely, and we will, AI can really help to take away a lot of the burden, both for the designer and for the healthcare professional that we design for, you know, to take away redundant tasks, you know, to take away the documentation burden, so that we can actually focus on what really matters, which is the true creativity and the true attention for that patient, which will always be human and never be AI, I think.
And to wrap this up, what are your wishes for the UX research field? What do you want to see in the industry?
You know, I've been in the UX and UX research industry and usability industry, for that matter, for 25 years almost. And for 25 years, I've been basically telling the same story, you know, that your UX strategy should be leading your product strategy, right? That UX should not be facilitating, but leading what you want to make. Which makes sense to all the people that are here on this conference today. But in general, it's something that we have to keep repeating. And I think it takes away so much of the actual creativity we can bring, because we have to keep fighting for early involvement. We have to keep fighting, you know, for really having a place at the table. If that, you know, in my dream scenario would be fixed and we would be an actual part of every product team, I think we can do way more amazing things.
These are awesome last words. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of the day here at the conference. See you soon.
Thank you.
Inga, du hast heute einen Vortrag hier gegeben. Kannst du mal kurz erzählen, was war das Thema und worum ging es?
Genau, ich habe zusammen mit iSquare einen Vortrag gehalten über einen Case, den wir mit denen durchgeführt haben, wo es quasi um einen ABC-Test geht für eine Homepage-Darstellung. Wir haben unsere aktuelle Variante mit 2 weiteren Varianten vertestet und das Ganze haben wir in der Digital Experience Sandbox gemacht, ein neues Tool von iSquare, das implizite Daten, also Klickdaten in einem High-Fidelity-Prototypen misst und gleichzeitig aber auch einen Survey-Data-Aspekt hat, sodass wir quasi Befragungsdaten und implizite Daten verbinden können und so natürlich sehr wertvolle Research-Ergebnisse bekommen haben.
Und deine Erfahrung gegenüber einem normalen A/B-Test?
Genau, also wir haben natürlich jetzt im Prototypen vertestet. Unsere normalen A/B-Tests sind die Live-Tests. Dafür brauchen wir immer IT-Ressourcen, das ist immer alles ein bisschen aufwendiger. Und dass wir jetzt mit dieser Sandbox die Möglichkeit haben, in einem, wie gesagt, sehr guten und stabilen Prototypen auch solche Klickdaten zu messen, ist für uns sehr, sehr cool gewesen.
Gab es so Überraschungen, die du aus früheren Tests nicht so kennst?
So große Überraschung tatsächlich nicht. Also wir hatten ja natürlich unsere Hypothesen. 2 davon haben sich ja auch bestätigt, dass die User ein paar mehr Infos brauchen, als wir ihnen aktuell zeigen. Wir haben das ja heute hier auch im Panel einmal kurz vorher so abgefragt. Was glaubt ihr, welche Variante wird gewinnen? Und der Großteil war schon auch bei der Gewinnervariante. Also es hat uns jetzt nicht wahnsinnig überrascht, dass es die Variante geworden ist. Aber doch auch spannend, wie nah die Version 2 und 3 auch zusammen waren. Und so das größte Fragezeichen war, die Leute wollen, also wenn wir sie explizit fragen, wollen sie ganz viele Infos, also wollen die Variante 3, wo ganz, ganz viel gezeigt wurde, aber sie brauchen die Infos gar nicht. Und das ist natürlich nochmal ein Feld, das sehr spannend ist, was man jetzt vielleicht nochmal mit einem Interview mit einigen Leuten vertiefen könnte, um da nochmal ein bisschen näher reinzugehen.
Da sind wir auch schon bei dem Punkt, was sind denn die Implikationen für euren Research in der Zukunft? Also werdet ihr Sachen jetzt umstellen, werdet ihr anders machen oder was ist so eure Strategie?
Genau, also mit diesem konkreten Case werden wir auf jeden Fall tatsächlich nochmal jetzt einen A/B-Live-Test machen mit den beiden Varianten, die wir hier in der Sandbox auch getestet haben und tatsächlich schauen, ja, wie wirkt sich das im Live aus, also wie verhalten sich die Orders bei uns und auch die Add-to-Cards und so ein bisschen schauen, wie springen die Leute hin und her, wo suchen sie noch Infos, also das Ganze tatsächlich nochmal live vertesten und wie gesagt, vielleicht machen wir auch noch ein UX-Interview, wo wir da nochmal mit diesem Prototyp nochmal ein bisschen tiefer reingehen.
Klingt alles super spannend. Das große Thema hier bei der Konferenz ist ja so die Sichtbarkeit von UX Research. Wie ist denn dein Take?
Ein Riesenthema. Also wir arbeiten da natürlich gerade auch stark dran. Bei uns intern benutzen wir SharePoint als Intranet quasi. Und wir haben eine SharePoint-Seite von unserer Abteilung, die wir füttern, wo wir unsere Researches eben auch zugänglich machen für alle. Natürlich müssen wir die Leute da irgendwie hinkriegen. Dafür nutzen wir bei uns Viva Engage. Also wir arbeiten schon auch sehr, sehr viel an der Sichtbarkeit, an der Darstellung unserer Inhalte. Denn die Researches, die wir machen, das ist immer alles Aufwand und das sind immer alles geile Ergebnisse. Aber wenn die nur bei uns bleiben oder nur diese eine Fachabteilung sie nachher zu sehen bekommt, ist es fast schade. Deswegen versuchen wir, das breit zu streuen und allen in unserer Company die Möglichkeit zumindest zu geben, sich unsere Ergebnisse in allen möglichen Bereichen anzuschauen.
Und wo sind da die Herausforderungen? Also wie gut oder schlecht klappt das?
Also es wird besser. Wir, wie gesagt, haben diesen Kanal, den bespielen wir mit unterschiedlichsten Formaten. Wir machen Videos, wir arbeiten gerade auch dran intern, auch unsere so Fact-Sheets, also die Informationen nicht immer in einer riesen PowerPoint zu präsentieren, die sich keiner anschaut, sondern das Ganze nochmal zu komprimieren und diese Fact-Sheets dann auch ein bisschen zu animieren und die auch quasi digital zu präsentieren. Wie gesagt, in Videoform oder auch einfach mit Audio oder so. Also irgendwie neue Formate tatsächlich zu suchen, wie wir die Researches gut präsentieren und in die Unternehmung bringen. Und ich glaube, wir sind da tatsächlich auf einem ziemlich guten Weg. Ist irgendwie auch nochmal eine ganz andere Herausforderung so. Wir können alle die Methoden und so, aber das dann rüberzubringen und weiterzutreiben, ist eigentlich quasi ein bisschen wie Marketing. Für sich und seine Researches machen. Aber macht auch trotzdem Spaß und ist cool.
Ja, das ist eine Nachricht, die ja hier so ein bisschen öfters heute verbreitet wurde, mehr Marketing machen für User Research. Abschließend, was ist dein Takeaway von der Konferenz hier?
Ich fand die Konferenz sehr spannend, vor allem eine total nette Atmosphäre, sehr locker, auch gerade in den Pausen hat man irgendwie schnell Anschluss gefunden und super interessante Gesprächspartner und Gesprächspartnerinnen, bei mir tatsächlich nur Partnerin, gefunden und das fand ich irgendwie sehr nette Atmosphäre. Hat auf jeden Fall viel Spaß gemacht. Und mein Vortrag hat mir auch viel Spaß gemacht.
Das glaube ich. Jetzt muss ich doch noch eine Nachfrage stellen. Wie siehst du das Feld User Research sich zukünftig entwickeln? Also gerade mit den Eindrücken von der heutigen Konferenz hier.
Oh ja, gute Frage. Also jetzt gerade läuft ja noch das Panel zur Demokratisierung. Ja, ist bei uns auch immer wieder Thema. Wir versuchen auf jeden Fall auch in unserer Company, ich habe eine UX-Taskforce gegründet, also generell das Thema User Experience, überhaupt erstmal Research, Design, Management, alles so ein bisschen populärer zu machen und ein bisschen mehr an den Mann und die Frau zu bringen. Ich glaube, das wird weiterhin super, super wichtig sein, weil ohne UX geht's nicht, glaube ich ganz, ganz fest dran. Aber das Wissen oder dieses Mindset ist immer noch nicht genug, bei uns auf jeden Fall noch nicht genug verankert. Also ich glaube, wir müssen da weiter so ein bisschen kämpfen, ist immer ein blödes Wort, aber weiter dran arbeiten. Wir alle hier auf dieser Konferenz und überhaupt, uns sichtbar zu machen, unseren Impact zu zeigen, den irgendwie darzulegen. Und ich glaube, das wird weiter so gehen.
Perfekte Schlussworte. Inga, vielen lieben Dank für das Interview. Dann jetzt eine gute Fahrt mit dem Zug zurück ins Hauptquartier, nehme ich mal an.
Ja, genau.
Genau, und dann bis demnächst.
Klasse. Vielen Dank dir.
Ciao. I'm sitting here with Utkarsh Seth, Senior Staff UX Manager at Google, and he gave a talk about Beyond Insights, unpacking UX research for demonstrable impact. Utkarsh, can you tell us a little bit more about what does real impact mean for you?
The real impact, in my opinion, is before I answer that question, let's talk about what is impact in the first place and how it is defined. The traditional way of thinking about impact is that when a change happens on a product or a user interface, and that is traditionally referred to as product impact, but there are two more types of impact that companies track and are incentivized, which are people and process. So basically, what a people impact is when you change the way someone thinks as a result of data collected through research, and the research changes the way someone thought about a particular topic. This third type of impact is process impact, which is pretty self-explanatory, which is when a team used to do things a certain way, and as a result of research, now we are doing the same things, but in a more efficient or in a different way. So it's people, process, and product. And what I mean by real impact is any time the work actually changes any of these three things is impact. And so and there is evidence, so it's not just impact, but it is demonstrable impact, which is like you can demonstrate and produce evidence about the fact that something happened, is the true meaning, because I very firmly believe that research and design and writing that is done and sits on shelves, especially in an industry setting, is wasted work.
And at what stage in the research process, planning, doing, analyzing, sharing, do you see the most missed opportunities for real impact, and why?
Yeah, and so this was a part of the talk which I gave at the conference, which is counter to how people think that executing good research carries the most weight in showing impact. It's actually the planning and delivery of research that has the most weight. Now, the key emphasis here is that it's not importance, it's weight, which is everything is important. Doing good research is important, but unfortunately, doing good research carries the least amount of weight in increasing the likelihood of research showing impact. Now, what we have missed is that we don't invest enough time in planning, and we oftentimes find researchers giving presentations of research towards the end, and people go like, oh, that was great research, but nothing happens. And people try to diagnose the situation in the moment, or why didn't anyone act on my research, when they actually are forgetting that this is more of a planning issue than a delivery issue, because the research wasn't planned and scoped correctly. And so one very specific example that comes to mind is, for example, one of the reasons why research doesn't end up showing impact is because it is not tied to the decisions the team is trying to understand. And the decisions the team is trying to make in the product or the strategy or changes should actually be understood at the planning stage. Like, why are we trying to do this? Like, before we even put pen to paper, some questions that are very helpful are, let's imagine we have done the research today. Tell me the 3 decisions you would take differently or you would take tomorrow now that you have the data. So I think planning is a very overlooked part and is one of the most important things. And then the second is delivery of research, which is like we don't invest enough time in collaborative synthesis. Like we spend too much time in looking at large amounts of qualitative data ourselves, when we should be actually inviting people and our partners to the synthesis, not necessarily to produce a research deck, but to get them immersed in the data and build empathy, and so that we don't get into this research presentation where we are trying to convince our partners, but now the problems we have come up from research is not like a researcher's problem, but it's our problem, and we all as product co-owners need to go and solve that, right? Like, so it's not one person convincing anyone, it's all our problems, and we got to go and build a better product from there.
So that's actually a good segue to a book that you have written. It's called Applied UX Research, Bridging the Gap Between Academia and Industry, written for early UX research career professionals. So I think that addresses some of the points you already mentioned. Could you give us a little abstract, a little overview, what's in that book?
So one of the things I realized was, when you look at the resources available to students, there is a bunch of books that are written for students population. There is a bunch of books that are written for industry professionals. There is no book, almost no book, written for people who are making the switch between academia to industry, to help them understand, like, this is how I practiced in school. What does it feel like to do this in the company? And that is the number one question sort of like students have. And companies, on the other hand, are spending too much money in onboarding and take money, time, resources, right, in onboarding students, because they got to train people on how actually UX design research happens in companies. So this book was written to, like, why isn't anyone talking about helping students to see how what they have done is going to happen in. So that is the one intention. The second is, we hear so much about elevating the discipline. If you think about the traditional challenges which the discipline has been facing, right? Like some of the challenges, for example, research faces, is getting better integrated into the product. And not that those problems haven't been solved, those problems have been solved locally within a company. So it's working for a group of people, but the fact that we are talking about it, still talking about it, is because the new workforce that is coming and entering the industry has no idea what those problems are or even how to fix it, right? So we fix the problem much more 5-10 years in our career, but we never take the chance to complete the loop and impart that knowledge in our education system. And so when new people enter the workforce, they face the same problem. And that prompted the idea of a book. And it was an outburst of frustration for the lack of resources that we have available for students and early career professionals who are entering the workforce and are going to face the same challenges that I faced. And I don't want them to grow up in the discipline just like I grew up. And I want them to elevate the discipline by solving problems that are much more advanced and not that have already been solved.
So then the short question, what is missing? So what is needed in the early years or in the early months, basically already, of the career?
There are solutions that are available currently. I'm not saying this because I work at Google, but Google does have a UX design certificate course, the curriculum of which has been created by industry professionals, people who work at Google, UX researchers, UX designers, UX, and some very talented people who I worked with in the creation of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. That is a good example, right? Mm-hmm. Which is that you study and you take the certificate and you actually learn how UX is practiced, and that is a good example. There aren't too many schools who do this, unfortunately, but Savannah College of Art and Design is a good example where they bring in industry professionals. They put them right next to the student and say, learn from this person, right? Like going back to your question, I think we need systemic, fundamental changes in how and what we are teaching students and the future workforce who is going to enter the industry. Not just theoretical skills, which are, no, I shouldn't say just, because they are very, very important in our core role knowledge, but also applied research and applied design by explicitly having industry partner with the universities to impart that knowledge. So those are some of the solutions that come to mind, and I'm sure there are more, but I think we need to sort of like change the system from within.
Yeah, these are great insights. And so these have been 2 intense days of conference here. So what are your takeaways from these 2 days?
Being in a tech bubble, I don't every day think about how same processes are slightly different in different kind of industries. So there are people from the furniture industry, there are people from the healthcare industry, there are people from FMCG, there are people from all walks of life. And I don't really think about these people in my day-to-day because I brain and they're talking about how they do work. And I'm just like learning from the diversity of perspectives that are coming across and slight changes and tweaks here and there. I'm like, oh, that is something I can do in mine. So I'm taking a lot of those away as well.
So more knowledge sharing inside the industry, basically. Yeah, thank you so much. Any last words before you head off back to the States?
No, it has been great. I thank you for the opportunity to be here for this podcast. I would encourage people to reach out and more than happy to engage and talk. And yeah, thank you.
That sounds very good. We put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes and also the link to your book, and hope to see you soon next time.
Thank you.
So I'm sitting here with Lloyd from Stravito, and he gave a talk about solving the research awareness problem. And let's dive deeper into this topic. But first of all, what does your company do?
Yeah, so Stravito is a knowledge management platform that was originally born as a traditional repository where people can centralize their research and make it easy to find. But over time, we've evolved it to more of a research delivery and discovery platform, if you will. We're still figuring out exactly what the right terminology should be for that, but it's really been born out of what the market has been looking for and just making their research more available and visible and discoverable to their stakeholders.
Great segue to the topic of your talk. So sometimes, obviously, research gets unnoticed. So why is it so hard to solve that problem, being more noticed and being more in front and center, of the stakeholders in your company?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably a number of factors, and I won't get through all of it, I imagine, but a couple of things come to mind. One is I think it's partially self-inflicted in so much that I think researchers are often so focused on doing the research and answering the questions that they have to answer at hand that they're just not thinking about how people would receive the information as well as who should receive the information. That's often a very narrow focus. And so they might just be too focused on supporting the 1 or 2 product or design people that have been asking for this research, whereas it's very possible that research is very beneficial to many other people within the organization, but it's simply not placed in a way or delivered in a way that can reach a lot of those people. So I think that's part of it. I also have frequently heard concern around, and this actually I think bleeds into maybe another relevant question, is what if people misuse this data, or what if they make up conclusions that are completely wrong because they have access to research that's been, for lack of a better term, democratized to them. Our view is that the greater benefit far outweighs the risk of that. We actually see that when people get presented with research, they don't just take it and run off with it. Often it's kind of a starting point for more collaboration with researchers. They actually want to learn more from the subject matter experts and engage in that dialogue. And so really we think of ourselves as being the gateway, just to help people to become aware of all of the amazing things that are out there, which hooks them and gets them coming back.
Yeah, thank you. So, and you already mentioned this in your talk. You don't have a silver bullet for basically that the research gets used and the research gets promoted inside the company, but do you have any strategies that you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, there's the things that I brought up in my talk, but the way we broke it out is think about who the audience is. Think about how they like to consume information. Think about when this information would be interesting to them, and think about what would be relevant to them in their roles. Now, you can't account for all of that for every individual person in your organization, so you have to begin to segment a little bit. You also need to find scalable solutions so that people can access things at a time and in a mode that is of convenience to them. It has to be convenient. Just like any other UX research you're doing, you're always looking to reduce that friction, right? In the very same way, your stakeholders will not consume your research if there's a lot of friction. So how do you deliver that in a very personalized, relevant way? And I think the best way to do that is by breaking out your audience into segments so that you can do things a little bit more at scale. This is a great use case for actually AI. I think there's a lot of concern around the accuracy of analysis that's been done by AI, and that I'm sure will get better over time, but there's a little bit of fear and reluctance there. But what we typically recommend to our clients is take the research that you have produced, the report or the output, the readout, and feed that into the AI and say, how would you repurpose the key insights or the recommendations for this for this audience, for the marketing team, or for an executive based on what they would think about? Or you can be even more prescriptive and say, my executive team cares about these things. Mm-hmm. How would you repurpose this content to make it easy to consume for them? And use that as a springboard to have that initial kind of construct of the content, as opposed to feeling like you have to re-editorialize everything for multiple different audiences.
Got it. And with your company, basically, what are the biggest challenges that you still see in the whole UX research area, basically? What things are basically unsolved from your point of view yet?
I mean, I think we're making great traction in terms of how we personalize the research in a way that is going to be meaningful to the different stakeholders. But I think there's a lot more that can be done. Our system does things like sees the patterns of what people are typically consuming, takes into account what their role within the business, and the system can then kind of curate the content automatically to some extent based on that. But with the AI, I think we can go a lot further. But of course, there's still a lot of those concerns about the fidelity and the trust and the accuracy of the AI. So it's very much a work in progress. But more broadly, and I don't know that this is necessarily a technological limitation, as much as people admit the importance of visibility of research, I think people are still learning how to be more business oriented. They've heard all the talks already. They've heard all of the people talking about how important it is and how critical it is in this day and time, but actually building that muscle memory. So maybe that change management is a critical aspect that, although it sounds nice, how do you actually operationalize that? And having the steps to do that is something that people are still learning to do.
And to close this off, so what are your personal takeaways from this conference?
I feel like as much of the doom and gloom communication that we've heard, there is a very eagerness, I feel, by the industry and by researchers to adapt to that change. And I think the first session, one of the first sessions today, was talking about the importance of resilience. And I feel like there's a lot of evidence of that in the people in the room. Their posture or their attitude seems very willing to accept the new realities and take it on head front, as opposed to being stubborn about the old ways of doing things. So I think that was a very positive sign, and hopefully we all together figure out how to move forward from here.
Thank you so much, Lloyd, for this interview. See you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So, das war's auch schon von der UX360. Wenn hier eins klar geworden ist, dann auch UX Research steht gerade vor einem Wendepunkt. Was bisher stillschweigend mitlief, wird jetzt hier laut ausgesprochen, nämlich wir haben kein Research, wir haben ein Präsentationsproblem. Also nicht die Methode zählt, sondern ob dein Insight eine Entscheidung bewegt, messbar über Slack-Mentions oder Jira-Tickets oder auch die Repro-Aktivität ist. Ein Thema, das wir auch mehrfach in den letzten Ausgaben für UX in diesem Monat hatten, war, UX muss mehr strategisch werden. Also von Usability-Checks hin zu echter Produktentscheidung. Also zu der Frage, should we build this at all? Dann auch UX-Professionals agieren heute als Übersetzer zwischen Fachlichkeit, Business und Nutzerrealität. Dann auch hier ist AI nicht mehr nur ein Buzzword, sondern Werkzeug. Also man sagt hier Humans in the Group, Machine in the Loop. Also man hat hier Interesse an neuen Tools gesehen, die die Synthese beschleunigen und auch das Testing direkt auf echten Interfaces. Und UX hört nicht beim Kunden auf. Also IKEA stellte hier zum Beispiel ein Framework für sogenannten kultursensitiven Design Research vor, welches es bald auch öffentlich gibt. Das packen wir dann in die Shownotes, sobald es online ist. Und Trustpilot erinnerte hier daran, Vertrauen wird gestaltet, nicht vorausgesetzt. Also kurzum, die UX360 hat hier klar gemacht, wenn du UX Research wirklich ernst nimmst, ist jetzt die Zeit, nicht mehr nur auf Effizienz, sondern auf Wirkung zu optimieren. Ja, und damit übergebe ich jetzt an Future Matthias. Dankeschön, Vergangenheits-Matthias. Es ist jetzt eine Woche später, ich stehe schon wieder inmitten von Berlin, diesmal vorm historischen Kolosseum-Kino inmitten von Prenzlauer Berg. Hier treffen sich gerade ein paar hunderte UX-Professionals zur UXDX-Konferenz. Und ich bin hier verabredet mit Conor Joyce von Microsoft und dann schauen wir mal, was er dazu zu sagen hat. I'm sitting here with Conor Joyce, Senior Researcher at Microsoft. He just gave a talk about design system moving more towards interaction system. Conor, can you tell us what does this actually mean?
Yeah, first off, hello Matthias, thank you for having me on. So yeah, I introduced a framework that I've been using from the work that I've been doing for about the past year at Microsoft, which I call Evolve, Align, and Lead. And that is the shift from design systems to interaction systems, which I think is so important in our age of AI right now, where teams have the desire to build quickly, which is good. But what ultimately happens if you have a bunch of teams building a bunch of features in a variety of ways, well, then when you want to actually create a unified system, which is so important when you are developing especially an agentic system, something that communicates to people like a human would, you want it to come off as a singular system, well, then you have to do a lot of cleanup. And so the first step is evolving. It's thinking about the reality that the market has changed and AI is here to stay. And so teams need to shift from having a design system that's more about that component piece, and they need to actually have an interaction system. They have to think about the fact that there is conversational ability that's inherent with any feature, at least potentially. And that evolution is choosing the right time to include AI in features and then having some rules behind what to actually do with it. So it's evolve. Aligning is finding the right team to do that work. Generally, in my opinion, it's the design system. That's what I found most useful at Microsoft. And then the last piece is leading. Once you've aligned around the questions that team can answer, starting with that question of when to do AI-enhanced features, when to do chatbots, but there's many other questions that come inherent with this AI evolution, is to lead, is to go out and build documentation so that it's there. So when teams need to make those quick decisions, there is documents and deliverables that they can go and use to still act fast, but do so in a unified way.
Very, very interesting. So interaction system, how does it actually look like?
It really doesn't look that much different than a traditional design system. I talked in the talk about 4 main deliverables that I've seen, and this isn't exhaustive. It's really going to look like what a team member believes their team needs, but there is traditional Figma documents. There is engineering documents to correspond with those. Again, you want to make it so that the designers can move quickly and then their engineers can fast follow. You then also need to have a good design brief, or what I like to call a research brief, because it should have research that underpins it. And then lastly, you want to start some way for the team to communicate with each other. I talked about how there's a Teams channel that allows our team to communicate with each other in a way where they are able to share the best practices of implementing the different components within a specific area, like the waiting period while you're interacting with a chatbot, or how you hand off from one application to another in a conversational way. They're able to share those best practices along with the documentation so that everyone feels in the loop of how to utilize this interaction system.
Diving even a little bit deeper into a very specific question when it comes to chatbots. So obviously the output of a chatbot is defined via a prompt. So how do you think designers should be involved in that process?
And that's the beauty of chatbots. I gave an example on stage about how chatbots are highly flexible, and it's because they are, and the outputs can be highly flexible. And I think a good chatbot experience, you have to, as a designer, think about what is the deliverable, what is the outcome that is going to match the problem that that user is seeking a solution to by using that chatbot in the first place. So sometimes that's going to be a paragraph. Sometimes that's going to be a graph. Sometimes that's going to be handing you off to a different application and not even fully responding there because there's actually a much better place to do that response. And so across the board, I think that the more important fact than a simple heuristic that is this is when to do this is just really ask yourself, what is that person trying to do with that interaction? And then what is the best output from that chatbot that's going to be able to help them move to the next level, next whatever they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And to close this off, so if you want to learn more about this topic and about the things you do, what would be a good source for that?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is my home. That's where I publish both articles. I share whatever's going on. So that is, if you want to learn specifically about my thoughts on design thinking, I'm going to have some more content coming out over the next couple of months there. I have a newsletter that I call Everything is a Product, and I talk about design systems there, but really that's just one component. It's called Everything is a Product because I do believe everything is a product, and that's the purpose of this newsletter, is to talk about how product development is, well, it's helpful for building products, but it's also helpful for personal development and professional development and really anything that you want to do. If you break it down like how you build good product by defining problems, developing good metrics, and then experimenting, you really can grow in almost any area. So it's a big passion project that I'm excited to share. And then last thing I'll say is I wrote a book called Bridging Intention to Impact, and that is the foundation of a lot of the thinking and the practice that I continue to apply. And so that book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and really many local booksellers can ultimately purchase it.
That sounds great. Obviously, we will put the links into the show notes, so hit him up on LinkedIn and check out the books and other resources. And to close this off, we are almost at the end of the first day. So, Conor, what is your take on this conference? So, do you have any takeaways already?
Yeah. And as I shared with you, I was just in New York last week for the UXDX New York, and really, I'm so grateful to be here because I think UXDX is one of the best examples of a UX club. And you feel it not just with, I get one perspective as a speaker, but you get it with a variety of different aspects of it, is that everybody that you interact with in one way or another they're happy to be here. They want to be here. They want to listen. It's one of the best audiences as a speaker that I've seen, of just people that are really engaged and there to learn, and everybody I interact with. So I think it's well put together. I think that the organizers really think about the customer experience, about the participant experience, and yeah, I've been having a blast. I'm excited for the rest. I'm doing a workshop on Wednesday too, so I love doing those workshops. So I got 2 more days ahead of me, I guess is what I'm saying.
Awesome. All right, Conor, enjoy the rest of your day in Germany and in Berlin at the conference, and see you soon.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Matthias. Cheers.
Und das war auch schon unser kleiner Einblick von der UXDX-Konferenz. Auch dieses Event hat mal wieder klar gezeigt, dass Design, Produktentwicklung und AI gerade nicht nur neu gedacht, sondern auch neu gelebt werden müssen. Meine Key Takeaways von der UXDX sind: AI wird Teil des Designsystems selbst, also nicht mehr nur Tool, sondern operativer Layer. Teams bauen auf Basis von Content-Style-Guides ihre eigenen GPT-Agenten, die nicht nur Text generieren, sondern auch Voice und Ton konsistent halten und Review-Prozesse automatisieren. Auch hier wieder, Design ist nicht gleich Figma-Screens. Pamela Mead, Senior Vice President of Global Design bei SumUp, fordert darum zu Recht ein radikales Umdenken. Also Design ist strategisches Entscheiden, nicht Visualisierung. Designerinnen müssen raus aus der Komfortzone und rein in echte Unternehmensgespräche. Und Ein Hersteller hatte eine schöne Idee mit Message, und zwar gab es eine Carrera-Rennbahn, die symbolisch dafür stand, dass man mutig neue Formate ausprobieren sollte, um in Echtzeit User Insights zu nutzen und diese dann direkt umsetzen kann und sollte. Ja, und dann auch noch, Designentscheidungen brauchen mehr Kontext und DesignerInnen sind die Hüter. Also in einer AI-Welt, die immer mehr nur noch Muster kennt, wird der menschliche Kontext zur neuen Währung guter UX. Tja, das Thema Ethik bleibt noch etwas vage und in Teilen etwas ungelöst, aber nicht ignoriert. Es werden unbequeme Fragen zum Thema AI, Nachhaltigkeit und Verantwortung gestellt. Und eins wurde daraus klar: 2025 wird menschliche Haltung entscheidend. Also, fassen wir nochmal ganz kurz zusammen. Die Zukunft ist nicht KI oder Mensch, sie ist KI durch Mensch. Ja, also die UXDX hat bewiesen, wer jetzt den Mut hat, neu zu denken, gestaltet mit nicht nur Interfaces, sondern ganze Systeme. Und damit sind wir auch am Ende unserer heutigen Spezialausgabe. Wenn ihr Feedback habt, wie wir diesen Podcast noch besser machen können oder was auch schon ganz gut funktioniert, dann lasst es uns in den Kommentaren wissen. Wir freuen uns auf jeden Fall sehr auf eure Rückmeldung. Also in diesem Sinne, euch noch eine gute Woche und bis demnächst.